What's the right way to use heart rate variability, HRV, to help us guide the training in endurance athletes? Today I'm going to speak about 6 years of data that I've collated from myself alongside the training in a simple format, hopefully for all of us to follow, to understand what it is, who it's best used for, and who won't benefit from tracking HRV, and a little bit of insight into two of the leading wearables at the moment that track this at night while you sleep, and what this buzz is all about. So I'm going to dive into a comparison all the way through pre-COVID, chat about COVID back in 2020, 21, some interesting stuff there, a little bit around injury, and then showing you how it helped guide some of my own training, which I've of course translated over to how I coach now. I've learned from a few of the best in the world around this. I'm not an expert in HRV. One of my mentors has a PhD in heart rate variability and has taught us and alongside other coaches in the past a lot about guidance and actually stepping back and understanding how best to approach the numbers. Stick around and there'll be a few little gems in here. So in a nutshell, what is HRV, heart rate variability, and how and why is that important for anyone, and can athletes benefit from it? I'm sure if you search on this channel, you'll find heaps of experts and people explaining HRV and what product is best to use it. There's lots of wearables, probably some of the cheap copies from China, for example, will probably do a pretty good job with devices. I have had the privilege of using, and it's not paid for by the way, I've paid and I still continue to pay for my Oura Ring. The first inception of using HRV and tracking was 2019. I started with Whoop, the band that you now have all probably seen with great marketing, and they involved with quite a few triathletes. So I was pre-COVID and decided to just start tracking. Wasn't sure exactly what I was doing with it. It gave you a readiness score. Some of you use a Whoop and some of you use Oura. I did the switch in 2022, so 3 years of Oura data. I prefer a ring, it's smaller, better for swimming, and they're both very accurate as far as I'm concerned, and there's been some independent reviews of both. They're each trying to obviously do better than the other and create better apps and user-friendly advice. And diving into sleep for females, it's great because it obviously does tracks menstruation and all sorts where you can input data like that. But today I'm just going to see how it correlates in the real world to, in a simplistic version, in training. And then I want to actually compare what actually happened in the real life. So heart rate variability, you want a high variability in your heart rate beats. It's the gaps between each beat. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different number. Unlike heart rate, where it's quite stable most days, most morning when you awake, say 46, 48, 50s, for athletes is quite common. If you have a bad night's sleep, you've overtrained, there's multiple variables here. You've had some alcohol, you are fairly dehydrated. Your heart rate will be elevated, maybe for 1 or 2 days, often when you're coming down with sickness. So you'll see patterns there, but it's quite stable. With HRV, you can really see a trend, and this is what we're after. And that's what I'm going to show you today. The biggest learnings I've had in the early years is rather just watching the trends and not worrying about your individual number on the day. Okay, this is critical key point number one. No given number on any day means anything in context of the 7-day, 14-day, the whole month, 3-month journey you're on. That's how it helps you guide the direction, if you're working with a coach, of what's too much, what's working, what's basically driving you downwards. And you'll be able to see at the end, if you stick around, how the 6 years have actually changed. And I can only deduce because it's changed from my aging of 6 years, but also my amount of training I've done. So there's probably quite a good positive spin, and it's the first time I've dived into this personally in the last few days. So it's actually been a fantastic insight. So hopefully it helps you. Now, if you're listening to this, you might be wearing a wearable because you've been exposed to the trends, the marketing to get onto this wagon, but you perhaps might not actually know exactly what you're looking at. So a lot of my athletes, I coach some of the runners, they use their Garmin watch at night. So you sleep through the night and it gives you an HRV score in the morning. They're not quite sure what to do with it. Garmin will give things like body battery. I'd really ignore that. The key metrics you want to try and track is sleep consistency, resting heart rate, and your heart rate variability. Generally speaking, higher is a nicer number to have than lower for you. All the athletes generally have a lower HRV as an average, sort of like 30 to 40 milliseconds. I've got a youngster under 30, he's in the 120s, 130s HRV. That's his number. It's the coefficient variant over a period of months that we want to track. Okay, this is crucial, is the trend. Okay, so who do I think it's for? If you're a beginner and you're just listening to this and you think, oh, this sounds quite cool, get a wearable, tells me what to do, maybe guide my training, but then you're following a training plan and you're not quite sure what to do, I think it'll just create a lot of confusion. If you're intrigued by tracking your health, which we all are getting much better at now, even the Apple Watches do a really good job with HRV, and they actually do ECG now, which I was listening to a cardiologist with a PhD only last week, who was a huge advocate of the diagnostics from an ECG, which actually caught me a little bit surprisingly. Wow, that's awesome for technology. So if you are going to do it and look after your health, it's actually probably a really wise decision, where initially, I won't lie, back in 2019, 2020, of course, like anything, I'm skeptical with new products and new gimmicks, and I don't want to just jump on it, talk about it, and then hope for the best and, maybe get some free product. That's really not what I'm about as a coach. Is it going to help me and my athletes? And the answer is yes, and here's why. If you're an experienced athlete and you already have been training for a number of years, so you've done more than 3 triathlons, you are chasing performance goals, it's part of your life all year round, and you're not tracking at least HRV, you're missing a beat, because you really don't know what's going on with your parasympathetic system. Okay, so you've got sympathetic drive, which is your fight or flight, if you want, your exercise, your movement, everything that you're conscious of. Parasympathetic is your rest and digest, the breathing, the repair, the nighttime work. Most of us are quite stressed than sympathetic. You've probably heard these terms thrown around. I probably won't go into too much detail here, but we're always shifting in and out of both. We never just like sympathetic driven with training and then suddenly we go, I'm just going to sit down on the couch and be parasympathetic. You're always quite blended of both. Of course, when you're doing deep breathing, whether it's yoga or you're relaxing or you're doing a nap, 20-minute power nap, you are stimulating parasympathetic, okay? That's really important to have both for recovery. Now, if your sleep's being affected, your parasympathetic's not getting enough airtime. Of course, it's going to affect your HRV. If you're somewhere in the middle, intermediate athlete, you dabbling a few seasons into triathlon, you sometimes get injured. It can actually pick up when you are going to get injured, and I'll show you on a few slides time. When I don't actually get injured, which is quite nice. I get some calf niggles, but I had a surgery around a meniscus, and I'll show you exactly where that happened. And the proof's there, I didn't manufacture this, which is quite cool. And so it's a real thing. It picks up inflammation in the body. Why? Because it's stressed. Your parasympathetic system, it makes complete sense, is under stress. Training creates stress, good stress. Relationships, yes, creates huge stress. Poor diet, alcohol, huge one. This is the biggest thing, not great for these alcohol companies, is driving the HRV down so people stop drinking and then the HRV heads up. So whatever level you are, and you can see some of the pro athletes now, yes, they get endorsed and sponsored and stuff, but they are starting to utilize it in their training and making decisions, but it's not the decision on its own isolated. When you wake up, ask yourself, how am I feeling? You go to the toilet, am I very dehydrated? These are all areas that you don't need a device for. But what we're finding, that they give you a readiness score. I think we call it a recovery score, or green, red or yellow, or have a daily readiness. Step back from that, I've never really aligned with that. And there was actually a paper, I'll include the link in it, that looked subjectively at swimmers, and it was, right, how do they feel, what are the scores? And they realized actually the biggest metric is how they actually felt objectively that day, rather than their readiness scores over a period of time. High-level elite athletes. So the readiness scores, I tell my athletes, pinch of salt. It's just there because it has to give you something. Because I get a lot of times where the guys say, I'm a red score, what should I do? It could be a number of things. If you overreach the day before, you're going to be driven down that day. Sometimes the goal is to drive down HRV for a number of days, yes. And then you pick up and change the training, and I'll show you how that works in a few slides time. So I'm going to get my Miro board, and it's really simple. It's not too sciencey, I promise. And I'm just going to discuss effect and cause and how it correlates with each other. And I find it quite fascinating, and I hope you will Also, I'll link in a couple little videos during as well, so it will help feed the whole story, because it's never just about one contextual area. It's what's going on in the real time, and age related and sport related. Okay, as I mentioned in the beginning, I learned a lot of my knowledge from Dr. Dan Plews, who's got a PhD in this area. He's written multiple papers on heart rate variability guided training. It's how I adapt my training for a lot of my athletes. I try and advocate my regular amateurs, any elite people that I coach, to get on the wagon with some HRV. There are a couple of different ways to do it that's slightly cheaper. The actual app called HRV for training is something like $10. You use the camera phone and the light from the camera phone for 1 to 2 minutes in the morning, and actually it's pretty accurate. It's just the compliance of athletes are very poor, because remember, you wake up in the morning, you got to spring up, especially if you've got kids, or you forget to do it. And every day you forget, you're messing up the trend. So you can do it and try it for a month or two and just build some pattern. It's a great app. Marco Altini has developed that and puts a lot of effort in, and they often respond with questions that I have. I use that in conjunction with the Aura. I get the Aura data to push to that, and then I get a bit more trends, which I'll show you in the graphs, because they are from that application. It's just nicer to look at, and you can actually bring your training in. I don't do that. I keep it quite simple, which is always good. In terms of my athletes that I coach, I just keep an eye on it. In Training Peaks, it uploads there. Some of it doesn't always upload, but I always get them to check it and see where we are, and we try and get it to trend upwards before an event, and I know the person's a bit more rested. There's a few nuances with HRV. Sometimes you get an odd, massive high score fluctuation for some reason. Those are kind of the areas you ignore, but if it's constantly driving down or constantly driving up, it really tells us something. So over to my board. Here we have 6 years of HRV data on the left with some captions, and training from Training Peaks as a screenshot, all my training, whatever I've done through the year or not done, and how it compares. Okay, I've got half of 2019 because that's the only time I started. Okay, so it started tracking. You can see there's a trend line here, and that's quite important, with some spikes. And then on the right hand side, we're going to just cross-reference what actually was going on. So here I had just done a 70.3 race at the end of June, okay, and you can see I've sort of not done much training, and the HRV is driven down. So what drives up HRV is quite a lot of zone 2 work and stimulus, and what sends it down is inactivity or high intensity training. So you can actually see the training load flatten out here. Then I decided to build for a 70.3, and you can see things trending up, and yeah, you get little fluctuations, but the main thing is the build for the 70.3 race here, and how that nicely started driving HRV up. And then of course you come off that and no real training over here, and you can see the trend line. So the fittest I was here this year in 2019 was around here, and then mid-year I did another 70.3. Okay, so that's a fairly boring year. What I want to do is, COVID's hitting, so there's some cool stuff there, and also the birth of a child, how that affects, how sickness affects, and remember I mentioned the surgery, and kind of periods of inactivity as well. Right, so let's zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit more. COVID year, 2020. Okay, went on the last training camp pretty much that was around, because it was just the beginning of March, before the birth of my second child over here. And we managed to get this nice boost of sort of fitness over here, and you can see a clear uptake of CTL, of stress, which is quite cool. New baby arrived and COVID hit, and we just sort of maintained through here. No one was knowing what was going on. I was home anyway, and I operate from home, and obviously flatline through there. Then I decided to, 6 or 8 weeks, decide to do a 2-day ultra, because that was all that was available. I've never done any ultra stuff. I suffered really more than I would in an Ironman. And you can see the peak here, and then you get a massive spike from the actual event, and then off a cliff. Off the cliff is never very good, and I'm not proud of that. You can see the drive down. It's just life. You tend to just take breaks, but actually the body hates that. And then I went into a maintain phase. So average, average amount of hours through the week. Okay, so that's quite a cool, that's the first COVID year. You could actually see I kept consistency all the way through to the ultra, and that was kind of the main thing. So that was 2020. Okay. Then we go into, I suppose, COVID year part 2. Is racing going to start? I wanted to do an Ironman. I had a deferred Ironman over here, and I didn't know that was going to go. So I just started increasing training volume, some ups and downs. This is when I had the vaccine. Okay. The first vaccine jab. All right, so you can see the increase in training here, and it flatlined through here. I got COVID only once that I'm aware of, and that was around sort of early May time. And it didn't really affect, it was 2-3 days. I just took it easy and spent some time in bed. But you can see that I actually remember celebrating because I Whoop detected at that time I was using Whoop, body temperature increase, HRV through the floor, and resting heart rate went up to like early 60s, which I'm normally like 47. So that was quite cool to see. And I then didn't know what else I was doing through the year, so I built to a 10K race over there. You can start to see some stimulus. I was obviously building to this half Ironman. I did a 70.3, and let's just cross-reference over here. Here's the peak, the race, and then I actually did clearly less training, and then from there and just sort of managed to float through to the half Ironman. I then decided to, 6 weeks out, build for that Ironman that we got. It was Mallorca, the only year they did the full. And stimulation, parasympathetic, everything started to adapt, which is great. You can see the Ironman build here, and it was pretty much around there, the race, and then recover and off. You can see that actually wasn't a bad recovery period through December, and I obviously ticked over quite nicely. So that was quite a nice year of seeing some peaks and troughs, and I maintained quite a good stability. If you stick around as well towards the end, I've just got one image of the 6 years of the graph, and you can actually see from 19 all the way down to for October 2025 when I was doing this, and it's actually on a downward trajectory. And yeah, that's just quite interesting. The next year, 2022, if you're still with me, let's zoom in. Okay, was probably my biggest year. Okay, so this is quite cool to talk about. I went on 2 training camps, February, March. I built for Ironman South Africa. Okay, where I qualified. First training camp, boom, yeah, increase, recover, drive it back up. Second training camp, that was a work camp with a group, but it was still a camp. Up and down, an Ironman build around April. Then a huge recovery period. Okay, you can see how long it actually takes to recover from an Ironman. This is what it looks like in stress. Boom, 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 increase, CTL goes up, and I'm around 100 TSS, if that's pretty accurate, another discussion. And then of course you peak, you can't maintain that for very long. And the race is in April, probably right there where that peak is. And then a huge recovery period. And then I decided, yes, I better pull my finger and do a long build to Ironman Kona. So there's the build to Kona. And what does that look like? So you can start to see the ebb and flow decrease down, and then I'm pushing the graph back up here, and that's what you want to see. So you can see this flow of the shaded area. That's what you're after, the general trend through the year. Okay. And then you can see the recovery period here, and then I just sort of stabilize. Okay. So 2022, I decided to take 23 off. When I say off, no Ironmans, no racing. However, we're going to talk about a marathon, and actually I just released a marathon video. I want you to have a look at this. It's the comparison between a fresh marathon, so standalone, which we sometimes do as an Ironman athlete, and some science behind. It's a little bit of a sciencey one around the marathon stress in an Ironman. Okay, 2023. Sick over here. Sometimes you get the winter bugs. There you can see the drop in training, and then the increase here with the training camp. So training camps are good. You get a high volume, you get high stimulation, you get more rest. Okay, so I was trending generally upwards here, and I decided to, around the summer, to do a marathon. Fresh marathon, and it was sort of, September time, and that's over here. You can see the increase in training marathon build, and the September marathon was around here. This is the peak there, boom. I tapered, and then bosh, started traveling, and then I started increasing the load. So here's the travel, drops down, not great for HRV, and you can see then I increased the training load. So that ties in quite nicely, that video around the marathon. Actually, the marathon went fine on 6 weeks of training, or 8 weeks, something like that, as far as road marathons go. Still taking the years off racing, I decided in 2024, this is where I am now. Yeah, you can see the dates, 2024. A pretty steady year all the way through. Build fitness, did a sprint in Xterra, off-road tri, so Olympic distance, did a 70.3 in South Africa, then I traveled. And here we go. This is what I don't get often to see because I went surfing and I tore my meniscus, bucket handle tear. Bang, look at that. Mid-August, exactly where it happened. Obviously on the decline, no training, hobbling around. Surgery straight away. Let's look at that. This is quite cool, I think. I would have been interested in this as an athlete because now we've got data. Torn meniscus right there, and of course nothing, flatlined. And then I was just doing some swimming, of course, around here, and then slowly building it back up with strength and so forth. Which leads me to hindsight into 2025. Not such a great year because of the setbacks, based off probably what I've learned in hindsight in maybe coming back too soon. Bear in mind, I'm a few years on now. So now this is 6 years on from the beginning. I'm 47 now, so 41 when I started. And then I had the child. My child's a bit older. Okay, so 2025, what did I decide to do? I needed to build back my training. So I started pushing up my HRV here. A little bit of a drop, pushed up through January, February, and then I had a little setback. From the injury, I just had a setback. Declined here. And then I came back again and built up the training. I decided to do the end of May marathon. I didn't have the longest build up. I'm just looking at the training here. Here's the build, sort of March time through to, so it was actually about April, but I'd obviously been doing some stimulus here, riding. Did the marathon here and then another setback. Okay, so things are starting to not go super well. Now, whether that was me coming back too fast, it was probably a combination of strength, lack of, and learning the hard way. I referenced that in my marathon video, which I urge you to watch because we still get it wrong, even as a coach. And this is up till October 2025. So you can see a little bit of training here. And then I went away and you tick over, but I didn't get, it's all the travel zones across the world. And yeah, not great for the health. So now we're just building strength and lots of gym work and feeling great. So HRV is starting to trend up. Okay, now another great video that I want you to watch. I did one on recovery and how we can incorporate that into our triathlon training. So I'm gonna link that in this as well, a recovery video. And all in all, you've waited to the end. What does that look like, Andy, in nice big screen? What's the trend in the last 6 years? And I only saw this recently, so because I put this together. Look where we started, and you can see the sort of the drop, I suppose, if you like, a linear drop generally. And what's changed? 2022 was the last Ironman I did. So my volumes did come down. So endurance training is good for us because yes, I'm older, so my baseline's come down more around the 40s now, where I was around 70s and 80s ms, milliseconds, the gaps between the heartbeats. But what I can deduce from this is that I need to do more endurance training. And this is great because now I've actually put that out there. And it just shows you, I've not seen any videos like this and data. I'm sure some people have put stuff together. But that's a tremendous little comparison. I hope you enjoyed that because that was quite nice to put together. If you want to watch how to build your own 70.3 plan, I'll link another video here, which I did ages ago, and actually people enjoy that, just some structure that I use with my athletes, and I hope you enjoy that. There you have it, 6 years of coverage. Whether it's for you, you need to make that decision. I certainly think it gets a big thumbs up to at least track your HRV. You don't have to go into the in-depth like that. That's quite involved. Make some informed decisions. If you want to work with a coach who aligns with that philosophy, please get in touch. Link in the description. Otherwise, feel free to watch more of the videos and try and piece together what you think is the best outcome. But ultimately, remember, context is key. Never just isolate one data point to make a decision. There's so many other variables, and I really hope you enjoyed that. And thanks so much for watching all the videos.